Okay, I'd like to call to order the regular meeting of the Village of Riverside Planning and Zoning Commission of Wednesday, May 23rd, 2018. Sonia will call the roll, please.
Chairperson Mateo?
I'm here.
Commissioner Scanlon? Here. Commissioner Marhol?
Here.
Commissioner Mendoza?
Here.
Commissioner Miller?
Here.
Commissioner Pelletier?
Here.
Absent is Commissioner Hannon. He may be joining us later.
Thank you. Can I get a motion and a second to approve the Planning and Zoning Commission regular meeting minutes of April 25th, 2018?
So moved.
Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstain?
Abstain.
All right, thank you. Any visitors, petitions, citizen requests, or communications? Did you want to say anything to the commission?
In reference to the zoning,
You can do that during the public hearing. Thank you. Director Rapp, do you have anything from the village board?
Nothing specific. We'll talk about their discussion of the proposed text amendment when we get to that item on the agenda, but no other update from the village board.
Okay. So at this time, I'd like to call to order the public hearing, PZ 18-01. A public hearing to consider an application for a map amendment rezoning for property located at 7234 West Ogden Avenue, Riverside, Illinois, in the B1C Commercial Subdistrict to change the zoning on the property from B1C, again Commercial Subdistrict, to B1TC, Transitional Commercial Subdistrict, to allow the existing medical office building on the property to be converted into residential condominiums. The petitioner is Tahir Seek. So at 7:03, we'll call that to order. All members are still here. All in favor for opening the public hearing?
Aye.
All right. Director Rapp, can you give us a brief summary, please?
Yes, the proposed property is currently zoned B1C, which is our commercial subdistrict. It's located approximately 400 feet west of Harlem Avenue. The property is proposing to be converted from offices, medical office primarily, to residential condominiums. His proposal is showing 12 dwelling units that could be made. Residential dwelling units, I should say, are only permitted above the ground floor in the B1C subdistrict. Therefore, the proposed conversion is not permitted in the current zoning district. Therefore, he is seeking a map amendment in order to rezone the property to B1TC, the transitional commercial subdistrict, which does allow multifamily as a permitted use. You have a copy of the use table in your packet. The existing building is located on the front half of the property, with the parking located in the rear half of the property. The main entrance into the building, though, does face to the west, so it kind of faces the access drive and some parking right along the building. The petitioner states that the building is mostly vacant and has been for the past 3 years. He states that he has unsuccessfully tried to lease or sell the property and states that the market for office space is very weak. Staff has looked into office vacancy in the metropolitan area, and according to CMAP, the Chicago Metropolitan Agency for Planning, the Chicago metropolitan area's office vacancy rate does exceed the national average and has for the past 10 years or so. So currently, we're looking at just about 13% vacancy rate overall in the Chicago metropolitan region. Staff also spoke to some local realtors regarding the residential market for residential condominiums in town. They stated that the demand for residential condos is much lower than the demand for single family in town. However, there is strong demand for affordable condominium units in the town with parking. And that supply of condominiums with parking in town is rather low. The supply of condominiums in town in general is rather low, but specifically with parking included is low. And when I say affordable, I don't mean like sub-market rates. What I'm saying is just something not considered a luxury condo. It's kind of a different market. So, in the petitioner's application, he states that the property had previously been zoned residential and had been apartments in the past and was converted into offices when it was renovated. Staff did look into this, and dating back to 1972, the property was zoned B1 residence, two-family dwelling, which at that point it would have been maybe a two-flat or something along those lines was that zoning.
Could you talk a little slower and louder?
Certainly.
can't understand.
Yeah. We need to hear the details.
Okay, I'll make sure I do, thank you.
Rewind up just a couple paragraphs,
Mhm.
if you don't mind.
So I previously stated that the office market in the Chicagoland area is lagging behind the national average. So currently, there's a 13% vacancy rate for offices in the Chicago metropolitan area. I also spoke to local realtors regarding the residential condominium market in the village of Riverside. They stated that although the demand is much lower than the demand for single family in town, there is a strong demand for affordable condominium units in town that have parking. The supply of condominiums with parking in town is fairly low. The petitioner also states that this property had previously been zoned residential and had been apartments before it was converted to offices with a renovation. Staff has researched the property zoning and found that back in 1972, this property was zoned B1 residence for two-family dwellings. In 1980, there was a zoning change village-wide, that's 1979, 1980, so zoning districts were sort of renamed. At that time, this was noted to be B4 residence or office residence district. In 1989, it was R4 residence, office residence district. Again, I believe that is just related to sort of zoning district name changes that happened as part of some zoning amendments. It continues to remain R4 in 1997, in 2005, and then in 2009, it was rezoned to B1C, the commercial subdistrict. So that's kind of the sequence of events as far as the history of the zoning on this property.
Attorney, can I ask,
Yes.
so it didn't change from 80 through 2009? I'm sorry, 89 through, were there other zoning changes made in those specific years that you're referencing?
These were just the zoning map histories that I was able to find.
Okay.
So
there's
some of
nothing
these changes, it noted, were due to zoning code changes, so renaming of zoning districts and things like that. But 2009 is where it looks like an actual rezoning of the property happened, where all of a sudden it was, although the property adjacent was zoned B1, this was zoned R4. And then with that 2009 rezoning, all of a sudden the property next door was B1C as well as this property. So that seems to be where, the last major zoning change happened on this property. But it was offices at that time, so it didn't become non-compliant or anything. Professional offices are permitted uses in the B1C district.
So there's nothing of any significance of 97 or 2000?
Nope, just happened to be the dates that I
Got
was
it.
able to find historical zoning maps and notations for that seemed to reference any sort of change related to this property.
Okay.
As for parking and landscaping requirements, the zoning ordinance requires 2 parking spaces per dwelling unit. The required parking for the condominiums would be 24 parking spaces based on their proposed 12 dwelling units. This property currently contains 39 parking spaces. Additionally, our zoning ordinance requires buffer yards between B1 zoned properties and residentially zoned properties, regardless of whether it's B1C or B1TC. So currently, there is not that required buffer yard and perimeter parking screening provided. So currently, the property is non-compliant as far as that goes. Any change with this rezoning would need to address that issue and provide the required perimeter buffer landscaping. And the petitioner has stated that he would address those nonconformities with that remodeling and construction. Also noted on there that the existing ground sign is located partially in the public parkway, and any new sign would need to be relocated entirely onto this property in accordance with our sign regulations. We have talked with the fire department. The building does not currently have a fire suppression system, and due to the change in use and the size of the building, a fire suppression system would be needed to be installed as part of the condominium conversion. That's something that would be addressed during the building permit review process. If the rezoning is approved, a site plan review would be needed for any changes on the property related to, like I said, the buffering and the landscaping. Condominium conversion approval will be required, and a building permit will be needed. You have outlined in your staff report what the standards are to use to be guiding you through the recommendation. A zoning amendment is a matter of legislative discretion that's not controlled by any one standard. So, in making your recommendation and decision, the Planning and Zoning Commission and the Village Board should consider those standards for map amendments that are outlined in your staff report. Should you choose to recommend approval of the map amendment that is proposed, staff does recommend the following conditions be applied to that recommendation. The first one being that the parking lot must be brought into conformance by providing the required perimeter and buffer yard landscaping. The ground sign must be brought into conformance. That a site plan must be reviewed and approved by the Planning and Zoning Commission prior to the issuance of a building permit, and that the project must comply with the condominium conversion regulations outlined in Section 414 of the Municipal Code.
Thank you.
Dr. Sheik is here to be able to answer any questions that you have, and you have plat of survey and the proposed elevations and a proposed floor plan that's indicative of each of the floors. It would be 3 floors of units there for your reference as you take a look at this.
So the public notice was published in the Landmark and will be part of the record, and letters were sent to neighbors. Your staff report says that you heard from 2 individuals, but no formal comments have been received by the village. Is that still the case?
Yes, I've not received any formal comments, but I believe that people are here to provide their comments at the meeting.
Okay. Would you swear in petitioners, and anybody who wants to talk tonight can be sworn in?
All right, anybody who wishes to speak or give testimony, if you could please raise your right hand. Do you swear that the testimony you will give is true and accurate to the best of your knowledge?
Yes.
Dr. Sheik?
Oh, I'm sorry, I do.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, Dr. Sheik, you can go up to the podium and present your case to us, please.
I have, can you hear me? I have passed my cards because sometimes name is hard to pronounce. My name is Tahir Sheik. I came from Washington University, St. Louis after completing my residency. I was very fortunate to be guided to this office on the corner on Harlem and Dalton, which used to be Windsor Medical Group. I was there for about 4 years, then I purchased this building to build up a psychiatric center in, I think it was 1983. Then we added another 9,000 square feet on the back of it and put the elevators and all the compliance with the handicap code. I have been working at McNeil for 36 years, and with mixed feelings, I quit the practice of my own, and I am now medical director at Good Samaritan Hospital, their psychiatric section, doing administration and part patients. We have been very fortunate with being part of Riverside, a classy town, beautiful town. Even after 36 years, every time I went through, I got lost going home. So I can understand why it's as beautiful as it is. When I say I've been proud to be part of it, we built a classy, beautiful office building. Oak floors, hospital-size elevator, handicap access, more than enough parking, which was required by the village. And the building has gone through some inside remodelings when it was rented by Hinsdale Hospital and some others, and village has been involved with the conversions over the period of time. Living in Oak Brook and Hinsdale for years, I understand why these communities are as good they are, because they keep track of what is being done, how things are happening. They have to be according to the code, and I have no doubt to comply with that going forward. It used to be 100% occupied for 27 years. I got divorced, I don't know, it's a bad luck, and the occupancy went down, the real estate went down around the turn of President Obama's start. And now it's occupied only 17%. And you can imagine the amount of money I'm losing. I put it on even an auction, advertised for $7 a square foot space, which was rented at one time at $22 a square foot. No takers. I know a lot of doctors out of McNeil. It's a good medical building. I put it on auction, and I could not get an offer of about $600,000. I needed to pay off the mortgage, so I thought, $700,000 of mortgage, I said, I'll take $100,000 loss and walk away. In the meantime, some friends have been talking to me. I've been in real estate, mostly office building. I own one in Downers area. I was not familiar with the residential real estate. And then, thanks to the architects and the gentleman who is going to be building this, that's what he does. He is not here today, he was tied up. So we came up with this idea that it may be a phenomenal thing to do, because when you go west of this place, as I've been here for over 30 years, there are 3 or 4 buildings built very much like this going north and south, which have been turned into condominiums, townhouses, or whatever. There used to be a bowling alley there years ago. A friend of mine, I knew this contractor, built it there. So my request is to change the zoning. One thing I can assure you, I think we have enough room to build the buffer and the greenery and the trees and also the parking. And we will be 100% compliant with whatever village will ask us, as I'm familiar with it. Whatever needs to be done will be compliant. Not only that, my feedback, being a physician, to the architect and eventually the guy who will do the building is, we want to build A-class condominiums which will be up to standard of Riverside. You know why? It's a selfish reason too. I think they will sell much faster. So anybody has any questions from me, we will be going along as you tell us what to do. Actually, Alfredo asked me, did I bring an attorney? I said, no, I think it's just, to me, I'm very open, I'm very simple if you guys have any question. And not just now down the road, we are going to continue to be involved with you. Actually, we will try to convert to condominium. As soon as I break even, then I may leave the rest just to rent it out. So I will be involved over the period of years. Thank you.
Questions?
Doctor, I have a question. How did you arrive at the figure of 12 units?
I think we have sort of a rough printout. It's about over 4,000 square feet each floor. There are 3 floors. And the way, tentatively, as it's tentative, it was divided was that there will be 2 two-bedroom units. One will be 3-bedroom and one will be 1-bedroom. So that's how because this runs like a longer building. So if we make one condominium on the south side of 2,000 some square feet, it may be a little bit too much, too big for the market. We have looked into that. I think there's a market study attached to it too. I have personally seen a couple of condominiums in Riverside. So our hope is to stay anywhere between over 1,000 square foot condominium. The only 1-bedroom, if I'm not wrong, will be about 800 square feet. So that gives us also a lot of choices for people who want to buy it. And plus, I mentioned earlier, it's a phenomenal building for people who want handicap access, because we have elevator runs very well. It's the hospital size elevator.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Yes.
I just want to be clear on this. You're going to use the existing building, the existing footprint, no new construction.
No,
You're
it's,
using it as it is. Is that
yes,
right?
yes,
Right.
that's true. That is true.
Okay, now, I believe you just said 4 units to a floor? So
Yes.
4-story side, or 3-story side?
Yes.
Nothing in the basement, that's not allowed for
No.
living?
No, actually, it is a split level. It's not the basement. Actually, the front windows are a lot bigger. The new building, when we built, because the office building has to have more space, so they went down, I think, about a couple of feet on the north side of the building. So already we have in the drawings, those windows will be enlarged because we have enough room to the ceiling. Ceilings over there are, I think, about 11 feet high, so we have enough room for that.
Okay. And so there will be one unit on that lower level or two?
There'll be, if you can look at this, it runs this way, the building north and south.
Uh-huh.
And the elevator is right in the middle. And you come up from the landing, you go on both sides, so there'll be 2 units on north side for 2 and 3 bedroom each. And then on this side, because it's a smaller section, will be 2 bedroom and 1 bedroom. And also, one of the limitations which we know is that we need to have fire access on both sides. So that's why on the south side, it limits us because we have to give exit to both the tenants on that side. That's why one is 1 bedroom, because we have to give room for the access to the stairway.
So let's have the commissioners ask questions first, and then we can go to the audience.
Sure. Can I get my coffee? My mouth is drying up with the
That's fine.
antihistamine, if you don't mind. Having a sinus thing. Sorry. Yes, please.
Hello, Doctor. Were you planning, in addition to the screening and buffering that's required by code, were you planning to convert any additional of the parking area to green space for potential future condo owners?
Yes, two things is obviously, one is what is required, so-called the minimum requirement. No, we will go definitely beyond that to make it look, as I said earlier, it should look like a nice building meeting the need of people if they want to sit out, put a picnic bench or whatever, which we used to have in one corner of our own staff at one time.
So you would potentially convert some of the parking area to grass area, or am I putting words in your mouth there?
No, my understanding is that we have to convert some of the paved area, so-called the concrete area. We'll dig it out and change that to the green area.
So your current plan, if this was approved, is you would put in the required buffering and green space around the edges of the building, but you wouldn't, your current plan isn't to convert any additional parking area to grass
Yeah.
or other plantings?
No, the first part, you're right, that we have to do that for the zoning change. The other part is, once we come up with the printouts, what we want to do, we would like to add more green areas for the beauty of the whole building and making it look like a nice residential building.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, thank you.
Other questions from the commissioners?
Are you comfortable that you have exhausted your opportunities to either sell or rent this as it's currently zoned?
I tell you, honest to God, I have. I have given, because being a physician, I know, our group, we had a group of 17 of us started from here in Downers Grove. We have left literally beautiful brochures, personally, me and my wife, in doctors' mailboxes, down to $7 a square foot. There was one group wanted to rent out of McNeil, then they changed their mind. If I have a choice, being a physician, I've done enough in my life, I'd rather have somebody buy this building. Anybody wants to do that, I'm willing to sell it the way it is. But we have not had anybody buying the building.
Okay.
And then I've done some construction in the past. I find that very exciting. So I'm not kidding you, I'm really excited about doing this project because we could show, not to us, but we're sitting here for the buyers to how nice a residential place could be. Building literally an A-class condominiums.
Could I ask him a question?
Please.
We're letting the commission ask
okay.
questions right now. Did you have more?
Yes. Sir, you said you bought the building in 93. Do you know when it was built?
I bought it in 83.
Sorry, 83. Thank you.
And I started office in Windsor Building next door in 78. So this was built around 78, 79, something like that. And the gentleman owned the restaurant Kitty Corner on the other side on Harlem and Ogden, Bulahanis. I think he owned about 13 restaurants in the area. So When I found out he's selling, as I said, I wanted to build a psychiatric center. Those days, there was a lot of stigma about seeing a psychiatrist. So I said, if you have a sign outside, people will know where to go if they need a psychiatrist without having to ask people and be embarrassed about that. And he had 2 floors finished at that time, which we did a little remodeling. I think I gave plans to the village at that time. But then the major thing happened, I think that was in 93 or 95, something like that, that we added not only 9,000 square feet, but we brought it to handicap access, put the elevator, on and on and on. This was done by the same architect, because I found out through McNeil that he has built out of their medical center. So it's very much like their own print on that, inside the bathrooms and the access and everything, the halls, and the ventilation in each room, both intake and outlet. By the way, I was working here till the end of full time. I was here. Advocate took over a little over 3 years ago, so I was working here till about 2 years ago myself. We had the office here. 5 of us were working here then.
Doctor, a couple of follow-up questions related to your search for tenants. Have you received any feedback from the other doctors you've approached to see if they're interested as to why, in particular, people aren't interested in this particular location?
That surprised me, to be honest with you. I think what has happened is, to my knowledge, because we have a specialist practice, so we may deal with 500 physicians who refer us cases between the 3 hospitals. None of us is spending money, because what has happened is the reimbursement since the new affordable health came. That's the reason we sold our practice to Good Sam, was that the income keeps decreasing and naturally expenses keep increasing. So most of the physicians, they are not willing to take risks or spend money. Everybody just sitting wherever they are. The other very major change came, which is with us now, that the hospitals are taking over medical groups or medical practices. So McNeil will have interest putting somebody in their building which is not fully occupied, then looking into our area. And that looks like the next 4 or 5 years, most of the doctors will be working or employed by the hospital. Is happening much faster because I'm involved with that at Good Sam.
And one follow-up question to that.
Sure.
It sounds as if you were, your primary target market were doctors. Did you attempt to get other types of professional services or other types of services to rent out the space?
Yes, we actually had 1, 2, 3, including Caldwell Banker or what's their commercial, CV commercial. Yeah, we have had 3 companies over the last these 4 years, but we have had no success. One came very close to opening up a marijuana clinic, dispensary, and I think they have been in touch with the town if it will be allowed or not, but they never got the permit to do that. So they were going to rent the whole 2nd floor from one end to the other.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
I have one question. I'm glad you asked that question because that was one of mine. But another question was, for how long have you attempted to sell the building as a whole, as a property?
The American Cancer Society was the biggest tenant. They had 2 floors, about 9,000 square feet, something like that. They left about, has to be 6 years ago, and their leasing was exactly the same. The economy has gone down, and their donations are down, so they had, I think, 3 offices in the Chicago area. They're consolidating to 1. So at that time, I tried to get the tenants. When did I try to start selling it? It has to be about 3-4 years ago, seller lease, and then I tried to sell it. Somebody before the CV commercial I had, and then it didn't happen, so we put it on auction with some auction people. And they ask you what's the lowest reserve, if I'm not wrong, that's the term. I said I will be more than willing to take between $600,000 and $700,000, but nobody was giving any bids. I don't know if any one of you have seen the building. Any one of you? It's a very beautiful building, very pretty building.
So if we recommend approval of the zoning amendment and the Board of Trustees approves it, you would end up with displaced tenants. So have you talked with your tenants? Do you have long-term tenants? Are they concerned about this? Do they have other places to go?
I have just Anna, she's really a darling, Dr. Valicki, you know, she's a dermatologist. So she signed initial 3-year lease, and as everything dwindled down, I was happy I was getting some rent from her because the rest I'm paying. So just only one suite is rented. She has asked me at times, so I have no lease with her. I'll be very heartbroken to ask her to leave. You know, she's getting close to retirement if she retires. She is the only tenant I have. Just to give you some inside story, she says, you know, just like everybody, income is going down, that our common area is too expensive. So I said, don't worry, I'll absorb your cleaning, $600 a month. So I said, you know, I'm losing money anyway, so $600 isn't going to kill me. So she's there, she's the only one. And at some point, most likely we will ask her to leave. When we get to that, we are hoping to start from the top floor and then come down.
Thank you. Any other questions from commissioners?
Do you have a realty professional right now who's helped you to develop this plan for the condominium conversion?
Yeah, gentleman is here, he is my architect.
Okay.
And that's what they do, that's their specialty.
My question was, does he or does the firm represent some of those other condominiums that you had mentioned along Ogden there, those other condominium buildings?
No.
I don't know what the rental rate is or the purchase rate, the occupancy rate is of those buildings.
No, I can tell you that because, you know, we have looked into that. You have a minimum price of a condo being sold here, and I went to see that. I would say in rather poor shape. It was 1 bedroom, 1,200 square feet. No, I'm sorry, that was 800 some square feet. Is in the market for $162,000.
And that's in one of the buildings right along?
No,
right along Ogden.
in town.
I'm thinking about the buildings right along Ogden, those other condominium buildings.
I think they're more like townhouses, that they have built parking, like 2-car parking, than the building above that. They all are like that. So ours will be a little bit different than that because over there they had tremendous restriction of space. If you look at that, I drove a while back, and hardly there's a cul-de-sac back there to turn back out, you know, in one of the buildings. So we don't have the restriction as, what's your name again?
Scanlon, Commissioner
Yeah,
Scanlon.
you asked us about would we add more landscaping. We have more than enough room to do that. And it doesn't cost you a whole lot of money to take the concrete out and put more greenery.
Well, so it sounds like you're fairly confident that this project would be successful, is that right? That you would be able to
hope
sell
so.
these condominiums? I mean, you must have a
Yeah.
basis for believing that's true.
Yeah, that's one. The second thing is that, as I said, my backup plan is I may not sell all of them. You know, if I think financially, I'm still working full time, and I hope to continue to do that. So money-wise, why I came up with this plan is I don't see any other answer, to be honest with you. You know, we all work so hard to make money, and it's just the last at least last 3 years or so, we just, you know, spending so much money. As you know, taxes in Riverside are very reasonable, if I say so.
And one more question. Did you consider just developing the top floor as condominiums for now to see if those could be sold, since your current zoning would allow for that?
Yeah, we are going to do, the gentleman again, I wish he would have been here, he's a great kid. That's what he does for a company, convert or remodel the homes and the apartments and condos. That he thinks that the most economical way of doing will be, instead of doing one unit, he wants to clean out the whole top floor and then finish that and see what the response will be. Absolutely.
So you'd start at the top?
Yeah.
Okay.
Mhm. Yeah.
But to follow up with that, to follow up on Commissioner Miller's point, would you consider starting with that as opposed to asking for the variance at this point? Because he can develop the top floor into residential, how it's currently zoned, right?
Yes, so it's just restricted that there's no ground floor residential in the B1C, but there would possibly, because it would become mixed use, then that does start to click in different building code requirements, such as having to do the fire suppression system and things like that, different fire code, life safety code things that have to be accounted for once you start doing that mixed use development with commercial on the first floor and residential above, that it might not be able to do, and I don't know necessarily what the cost is for that. So, I suppose it's up to him to decide whether that financially is workable to only have so many units then on the second and third floor and keeping that main level.
Can I answer from a different angle? Aesthetically, that may not look very good. Because a lot of people think if you have a beauty salon under here, what kind of apartments are upstairs? I don't know. That's the way I view it. Either he should be classy residential building or he should be classy office building. It's different if you see the downtown Riverside, same way in front of McNeil. These are very fancy buildings. They are built that way. They have quite a long lobbies and everything to go up, so you can separate that lot better. I don't know over here whether it will look that nice aesthetically, having all the mixture of things,
I did have one last question. Sure.
Please.
I keep saying that though. I think this is my last one. So, Doctor, I noticed that your competitive market analysis that you included is from a realtor in Oak Brook, which isn't that far away. But every community has uniqueness. So, have you actually spoken to a local realtor about what their thoughts are in terms of the market for units such as you're proposing in this location?
No, I haven't, but this gentleman, he looked through what is the availability, what the prices are, and I think Sonia also mentioned that there are not that many condominiums available here. Now, one of the most, again, long-term thinking I have is because it's very accessible building, If somebody's getting older, want to move out of the house, it'll be a phenomenal building that you have the elevator, you can take the wheelchair wherever you want to. They can very easily make the bathroom handicap accessible. So that was the reason I didn't ask any local realtor. No. My hope is again down the street. These things were sold because I said I've been coming here for 30-some years, pretty much every day, even weekend calls. They were gone before even they were built because people love the neighborhood, love the name of Riverside. If you do a good job, I honestly don't see any problem with that.
Which properties are you talking about there?
West of our building.
The townhome building?
Townhomes and, they're about, I think on one side they are 6, the other side they are 6, something like that.
Doctor, have you given any, this might be jumping ahead a bit, but have you given any consideration as to whether the condominium association bylaws will either prohibit or allow for owners to rent the units?
Actually, it's flexible. You can put both, because we will be making the bylaws, and naturally that has to be approved by also Riverside. It is actually, they are both models. I have some friends who have condos, they have rented in downtown, and there are some friends they couldn't rent it, they had to sell it. Yes, it is. By the way, I am working, there is the construction guy, the contractor, he is building a 16 condominium building on the northwest side of Chicago. So I'm in touch with their attorney who drew the papers for the bylaws for the condominiums.
So you've not made a determination yet whether it will allow for rental?
No, I'm very certain, yes. If you have in bylaws, it allows you to rent. Let me give you an example why it's not a huge project, That let's say somebody, I mentioned elderly couple, person moves in, and they die, eventually all of us do. They should not be restricted that they have to sell it if they think their son, grandson, somebody can live there, and just pay them rent or not. That's their business as long as they comply with the common area requirements and the bylaws. And I can tell you very proudly, you guys have kept me in line all these years, and I mean that. And I have learned eventually why, and that is Riverside is the way it is because you guys are really keeping it in line.
This may be more of a question for Sonia. Sonia, when you did the map investigation, you said in 1972 it was a residence, two-family dwelling. I'm assuming that building was knocked down to build this one.
It was zoned.
It was zoned.
That. I don't know if it had a building for certain on it at that point.
That was my only question.
I have actually just a point of clarification with Sonia as well. You indicated that under the current zoning, the building could be residential on the 2 top floors?
Yes, it only restricts multifamily on the ground floor. So ground floor dwelling units is specifically prohibited in the B1C district. So you would be able to do it on the top, top 2 floors or just the top floor. I mean, either would be, I think.
So 8 out of the 12, really you could do 8 out of the 12 units without rezoning?
Without rezoning.
And then you mentioned also the fire suppression system, but that fire suppression system is required.
When we
If he
have,
goes to multifamily,
Right,
it
if
would be
we-
required, so it's regardless if it would be.
exactly.
Okay.
So ground floor means, to me, that means the first floor where you walk in. Isn't there only one floor above?
It's garden. It's split level. When you walk in, you go down
Oh,
about
it's
6
split
steps.
level, so then the ground floor is considered the lowest possible floor? I mean, what,
The garden level?
the garden level
That's a fair
under the
point.
code?
Garden first,
Can I-
second, if you want to call it.
Can I
Yeah.
just
Which is the ground floor?
add to what I just heard? The most difficult unit for us to sell will be what we call first floor or the ground floor because, as I said, the front still the windows are decent size. The back, because we have gone down further by 2 feet. So that's where I was thinking, if they don't sell, I can always rent him out. Or I can sell him much cheaper if I don't want to be the landlord. So those are the areas, particularly that one, the lower level north has been the most difficult place to rent for me so far. There have been no renters there for about maybe 8 or 9 years.
So I guess a point of clarification that kind of comes from Commissioner Peltier is really what we're discussing, and this to Michael as well, is the top 2 floors could become residential under our current zoning rules. And really, the only consideration is that this change would allow for the bottom floor to also be residential, correct?
Yeah.
If that were to occur, if there's no zoning change, and a conversion of the top 2 floors occurs, are all the other conditions required to be met? The buffer and everything else?
I don't know that the buffer would necessarily be required, but any sort of building code, life safety requirements would have to be adhered to. And then also, if they were to be sold as condominium units, he would have to go through our condo conversion process and make sure that the bylaws, et cetera, are recorded appropriately.
As I mentioned to you, that I have not been able to rent as an office that area for 9 years, which is the north lower level, as an office.
Any other questions from the commission? Okay, we can open up questions from the floor. If you'll go to the podium to ask your question, please.
My name is Melody Anderson, for the record. So I have a couple of concerns. One is the amount of units. You have mentioned, Doctor, that you like to have 12, which seems to be a lot for that area. My second biggest concern is that the condos would be rented. I found, from my experience of living in Chicago, that whenever you have condos where the owners can rent, the renters do not care. They do not go by the bylaws. They frankly bring the property down. It's different from a commercial building where there are rules and there's a management company checking on people, but when you allow the renter to have, and I quote, just anybody move in there because they just want to get money, that is a problem. I don't know what the village's policy is on condo bylaws for the other condos, but I've never seen condo owners renting their units be successful. It's not a positive. It's not been a positive experience for me. It's not been a positive experience when I've seen it in other places. I'm also not clear on where your parking is versus McNeil Hospital. So I'm not sure how that would work. The parking lot seems to be fairly large, but 24 parking spaces plus a buffer and greenery, I think that it would kind of impact the McNeil parking lot. Those are my questions, but the biggest concern being if there are association bylaws, there should definitely be no renting in the building.
Yeah, thank you for giving me your feedback. As I said, that'll be my last option. I'd rather sell the garden units cheaper than hang on to 1 or 2 units. That'll be more peaceful for me not to be involved with that, but that'll be my last option. The second thing is that you're absolutely right about rental people not taking care of things as well. My guess is that the way our construction plan is that the rents will be premium. So we hope that the people who are living over there are professionals, semi-professionals, taking care of it. But one thing I want to answer, I think, Sonia, you may have a little confusion. We have 46 parking spaces, not 39 at this time. On the front, there are 5 on the front, then 39, I think. 46 or 48 parking spaces. So there is more than enough space. As I said, I've been here for 30 plus years with the building. I don't see why we will not be able to build 22 parking spots and have still enough room to have more greenery. If you want to, you can go over there, walk through, and you'll be amazed once you go in. Behind the building, there's a lot of room there.
Doctor, to follow up from the question from this resident, would you consider in your bylaws prohibiting renting unless there is a financial hardship? Because that I have seen that in condominium bylaws, be prohibited unless there is, some kind of proven hardship. To the example that you gave earlier of someone, passing away and then the estate not being able to sell it potentially, or some other reason.
I will definitely incorporate that. That makes a lot of sense. It does.
Is there anybody else who would like to address the petitioner? We'll have another opportunity for you to go up and just speak your mind. But if you have questions for Dr. Sheik, now you can come up.
I just wanted to ask about.
Can you come up to the podium, please?
This is a simple question, probably. You have your folders there. My name is Arlene Augustinus, and I live on South Delaplane, right back to back, closely. I just wanted to know about this parking. We're talking about parking spaces. Is there no enclosed parking? Is there going to be a garage structure of any kind, or is this all a big open lot?
It is currently a big open lot.
And it's going to stay that way?
At this time, he's not proposing a garage. He says he's considered it, but that would be a separate permit.
That's my question. Okay, that's my question. I don't think that those will command a whole lot of money if they have no parking, if they have no shelter for their cars. So they might be a little bit harder to sell. That would be my thought. And I might be looking for a condo in the next few years, so you never know. Never know who your neighbors might be, right? Thank you. Thanks.
Can I answer that? Yeah, our hope is come back to the village to ask for parking garages. I have no idea. Me and Sonia talked about it a few times, what the town will allow us to do, obviously. And that's why we left that to the future, because once we apply for permit, all that will be included in that, and obviously you guys will let us know within the zoning, within the land, what we have, what will be allowable at that time. But you're absolutely right. I think that our hope is, if they say, okay, you can build the closed garages, I will say, thank you.
Anybody else with questions for Dr. Sheet?
Nick Cariello, 354 Lino Road. My question is, the property went to auction. Why didn't it sell at auction? What was the highest bid at auction?
We had no offer at all, not a single offer.
Not a single
No,
offer
not
at
a single,
auction.
not a single offer.
Thank you.
And it was on auction, I think, about 4.5 months. We had no offer.
Brian Schwinn, I'm at 362 Lionel. So I'm probably the closest property to your building. My backyard, is right up against the front entrance of your building. So I'm neither for nor against it at this point, but I want to know, are you planning to include balconies on the front of the building that are overlooking the yards? Are there going to be balconies or any changes to the exterior like that?
No, not really. We are not going to do that.
Okay. And then my other concerns were kind of already mentioned. I would hope that the condominium bylaws or declaration would limit the amount of rentals to a very small percent. I fear that if the condos don't sell, that it'll become rental, and I don't want, that many renters in my backyard. So those are my concerns.
I think that's a great idea. I was going to say at my concluding remarks about having only the clause if it's due to financial hardship that somebody can rent it. As I mentioned, somebody died and maybe their son wants to live there or whatever. But we will not have then the rental clause. And the lower level condominiums, as I have thought it through before, let's say the upper level condominium sells for 150, 200, I'll try to lowball and get rid of the lower one too. So my involvement is not there.
So I was president of a 108-unit condominium building, and the financial hardship question, how do you define that? It became a legal issue. People said, I have a financial hardship, I gotta change jobs, I don't wanna sell it, I wanna rent it. How do you define financial hardship, legally? That became an issue for us, so I think that would for you.
I can actually ask the lawyer who will be doing this write-up of the bylaws, that make sure that that is as restrictive as it is, maybe clarify that a little more than just a financial hardship. Actually, I have marked it here for that.
You have a question for the doctor?
I'll save my comment when we go through, or we'll have a comment.
That's next.
Yes.
Okay. Any other questions for Dr. Sheet?
Am I done? No?
You'll have a chance at the end to
Okay, great.
have a closing
Great,
comment.
thank you. Thank you very much.
Okay, now if you want to present your comments to the commission, you can come up to the podium, please. Ms. Anderson?
So again, Melody Anderson, so I would ask the commission to have a uniform policy within the village of Riverside concerning condos. I am vehemently opposed to rentals. Again, I'm not originally from this area, I grew up in Tennessee, went to college and settled here. I lived on the north side, I lived on the south side, now I live in the near west suburbs. I have never seen one condo association with that rental clause ever go well. And I live at 405 Blackhawk, so when I back out, I'm at that McNeil parking lot. I think it could be a potential disaster and nightmare with 24 people living in that particular area, and then the thought of renters, because typically renters do what renters do when there are no consequences for them. It's on the owner of the particular unit, and as the resident stated, you always see that come up in the Tribune or the Sun-Times. There are always questions about renters, and they don't do this, they didn't follow this regulation, and what can be done. So I would ask the village to make a uniform policy that there be no renters in a condo building. It kind of has to be like all or nothing. I think that others have done it, and it's been better. So that is my comment. Thank you.
Anybody else? Mr. Cariello?
Bear with me for a second. My name is Nick Cariello, 354 Lionel Road, Riverside. First, on a personal note, the Cariello has lived on Lionel Road, 354, for 78 years. I was 7 years old when my parents moved to Riverside on Lionel Road. The 7238 Ogden Medical Building and Property. The 7238 Ogden property, along with the McNeil Building, over the years, has lowered the value of the 24 residential properties on the east side of Lionel, the east side of Delaplane, and the south side of Blackhawk. My backyard extends to the 7234 property. The proposed condos would be a hard sale, as the 7234 building has no common ground, surrounded by 2 parking lots with a combined total of over 200 parking spaces, a condemned 2-flat building, and Ogden Avenue. The property also went to auction without a buyer. The building has a financial problem, a $700,000 plus mortgage, which will increase the cost of each of the 12 condos by $60,000. Rezoning will not solve the problem and satisfy the mortgage, and could lead to a financial crisis. I'm asking the members of this commission to vote no to the rezoning of 7234 Ogden, and no to its recommendation to the village board. Thank you.
Anybody else? Dr. Rapp, anything to add at this point?
No, I think we kind of covered everything. I think From a zoning perspective, I would say, there's not a lot of differences between the B1C and the B1TC districts. The differences are kind of subtle. The biggest difference being obviously that a full multifamily building is permitted in the B1TC district. Additionally, things like drive-throughs, so like a bank with a drive-through or a restaurant with a drive-through or anything else, the drive-through. Those are special uses in the B1C district, and they are prohibited in the B1TC district. So kind of the idea is this B1TC district is getting more into a residential area where that kind of more auto-oriented uses is not appropriate. So those are kind of like some of the differences. Some other ones are things like, like currency exchanges and things like that, permitted in the B1C, not permitted in the B1TC. But in general, professional offices, personal service establishments, restaurants, retail are all permitted in both the B1C and the B1TC district. So there's really just kind of subtle differences between the two, but I think the idea is that the transitional commercial has been in areas like along Burlington or along Harlem, kind of between higher, more commercial-oriented things. You're in those residential zones where you have maybe the 4 flats or the 6 flats and things like that. So you're getting into more residential areas. So it's supposed to kind of provide that transition between those uses. So it's slightly more restrictive.
Do the commissioners have any questions for Director Apt at this point?
I have a question for you.
Commissioners. I found the information that you gave us from CMAP and the realtors to be very helpful.
Yes.
Did any of the realtors comment on the desirability of condos at a location near Ogden and Harlem?
They couldn't really say for certain, but they said a lot of times, it is the amenities that's the draw for the condo. So what they're looking for is that it has parking, that it is maybe has an elevator and is ADA accessible. What are the restrictions on things like whether or not they will be rented? Do they allow pets? Will they have a washer and dryer in unit, or do they have to use a common laundry room area? So those are more the drivers than necessarily location. But, they said there is a chance that, an Ogden Avenue market is perhaps different than the downtown market. But they weren't exactly sure. They thought the amenities was going to be more of a driving factor for demand than location.
Thank you. Mr. Cariello, you can ask Director Apt a question.
I'm not up to date on the present zoning, but when the rezoning of the B1 district, I have a question. I'll get to the question. What is the setback? Because that building was non-conforming because of the setback in 2006, and he was grandfathered. Now,
The
what is the
setbacks,
setback of 5 feet, 10 feet?
it's a 5 to 10 foot minimum, or I should say maximum setback.
Does the building conform to that?
I believe
or
it does,
not?
yes.
I doubt it. Thank you.
One more question for Bernadette.
Yes.
You talked earlier about a buffer zone. Is that buffer zone went in, is that between the back of my yard and the parking lot, or between his building and the parking lot?
The buffer yards are from the property line, so it would be along the property line. So any commercial use that abuts a residential use along that shared property line is required to provide a minimum 5-foot landscaped buffer. So that would be that. When you get to the parking lot area, we have more restrictions. In that case, that buffer is supposed to be at least 10 feet. So
And does that buffer apply whether he converts just the top 2 floors or only if the zoning changes and he converts all 3 floors?
That applies only if he does the rezoning and converts the entire building. As it is, it's grandfathered in, so we're not going to require him to come into conformance. However, if he does do the use change to an entire multifamily building, then we would require those buffers to be provided.
Okay. Thank you for clarifying.
So you said that there's a 5-foot buffer strip along the driveway, for instance, but then once he gets back to the parking area, it expands to a 10-foot?
Yes, around parking areas, it's required to be 10 feet.
Didn't know that, okay.
And really, there is parking on that side of the building, so really that would be considered parking. So it would probably be a 10-foot setback would be required, basically along that entire western property line.
Would there be a room for a car to pass with a 10-foot setback? 10-foot buffer?
There should be.
Well, I think it would just be a 5-foot buffer along the driveway. But have you looked at whether with a 5-foot, and if there's a 24-foot wide driveway, from my look at it, something would have to give there. But I think the neighbors would prefer it not be the buffer area, it be the driveway. But I don't know if that's a requirement that we're unable to vary because of fire code or any other requirements, that the driveway has to be 24.
The driveway would have to be 24 if it's to be a two-way entrance.
Okay, so the buffer might have to be shrunk then, if, from how I'm seeing it.
So he would need to come back, if this were approved and then he went forward with plans, he'd need to come back with a site plan for review, correct?
Correct. So this, whenever he has full plans drawn up and is ready to address the buffer issues and everything and how to redo the parking lot, then, and if he wants to do a garage at that time, all that would come before you as part of a site plan review. If there is a variance that would be needed at that point, based on how things lay out, then we would combine that with some sort of variance request that would need to be addressed at that time. But if he can accommodate everything without requiring a variance, then you would just have that site plan before you for review.
Would you like to make a closing remark?
If I was a neighbor, I would have some anxiety too, to be honest with you. I think the history has been that we have been very good neighbors for over 30 years now. I think it's your house where the tree kind of comes this way, new beautiful house. Is that yours? Yeah. And I wanted to make sure that our landscaper actually check with you before we are able to trim the tree because it's coming on our side quite a bit, And I hope that they have done that in the past. In addition to that, we have had the fence for many years now. Not a single board which is rusted or broken or anything. Again, respect to the neighbors and the neighborhood. I was told when we put the fence that they have a post goes up. And we covered our side with a plank, but not towards the residents. So I made sure that I put plans to cover the post so they don't show up on the other side to our neighbors. Let me just say this to you, that my goal will be that there should be no rentals. If that's what the village requires, I have no problem with that. Because I'm not going to live here in one of these condos, My goal is to look at it, that how we could move. And you brought up a very remarkable question, that we calculated that. I have a little over $600,000 mortgage. And if we go $60,000 per unit, our guess will be between 50 and 60. That ends up close to about $1.3 to $1.4 million altogether. And if we sold it in the middle market, not at $160 a square foot, not at $230 some square foot, which is one of them is on sale now, and there's a contract pending, we should have no problem making money on this. I wouldn't be doing it because, Why throw good money after the bad money? The reason I wasn't going with this earlier was, like everybody else, people have their own issue. I've gone through divorce, I'm tight with the money. So I said, no, I don't want to get involved with this. Some of my friends, colleagues said they'll put in money also. I said, I don't want this headache. But since we have looked at it closely, we are very excited about it. And I can assure you, not just for the sake of the neighbors, this building will not be the office building, it will be the residential building. So the character will come back, more trees, more greenery, whatever else we need to do. And to be honest with you, I think you live behind us, like on the north side, right? Yeah. And you have at times come to tell us, if there was a problem, what happens. In winter, stuff is there, and then the snow melts, and whatever debris starts flying, it will get into your yard sometime, and I made sure our cleaning people go and take care of it, whether the SARS or McNeil parking lot. So I want you to understand, for my own sake, I want to do this as a good project. The reason I will request you not to have the residential and the office thing, I don't think it will be that classy then, I want to do a good job from top to bottom. It will be easier for us to do that because you're talking about literally is the replication of the same thing from one floor to the second to the third. If you're going to go with the plumbing lines, as I have done some construction in the past, or you're going to go with the bathroom lines and stuff, they literally are much cheaper if you're just going up and down, because the water bill is always going to be one for the whole building. Somebody brought it up about what the laundry is going to be. We are having both, stackable dryer and washer. That will be in the drawings. And we are putting everything, high efficiency lighting, and also high efficiency even hot water heater. I used to see that in Germany many years ago. My brother lives there. It's about a little box. And when you turn the water on, and it lights up and the hot water comes in. We need to do that for two reasons. That is the future. Anybody who is going to come, they will appreciate these features that your utility bill is so low. And the second thing is, it saves a lot of space within the building. Everything we are going to put there, that will be the most high efficiency you will find in the market. I hope you give me the opportunity, we go forward. And obviously that's very clear to me and very clear to everybody here. Nothing will be done without the approval by the village and approval by the inspectors. I've done that before. They say, no, we can't put the drywall up. It's not inspected yet, So we are going to work with you, whatever needs to be done.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. I hope I did okay job without an attorney. Thank you. Thank you.
Would anybody else like to make a final comment? Okay, can I hear a motion to either continue or close the public hearing? Second? Thank you. All in favor? Aye. All righty. Okay. So would somebody like to make a motion to recommend approval or denial of the zoning amendment?
So I think just like an overall comment is that, well, a few comments. One is that even without rezoning, we're really just talking about this lower level, the ground level, really, because the other two floors, if financially feasible, could be done without any rezoning. I am concerned that no local realtor has weighed in on whether or not the units could be sold, and this is a desirable configuration, because although information is available obviously online to do comparative market analysis, I think that there's something to be said about talking to a realtor that really knows the buyers that are coming into a specific community and what they're looking for in the community. So I do have some concerns about that, about whether it would sell with the current proposal. Although there are certainly some very nice features in what, has been planned and what was discussed here. And then on the flip side of that, I'm concerned about what would happen to the property in its current state. If, we can't get anyone to rent it, even at, very low rental rates per square foot, it's not, no buyers looking for it, then, what will happen to it? It will, potentially, if, at some point money runs out, it just wouldn't, it potentially wouldn't be maintained. So, what is the option then? And so those are just my general thoughts and what I'm weighing, myself in terms of, proposal for this.
I would think if this project is going to go forward in one form or fashion, and I'll assume it's going to go forward because the other option is it's a losing proposition. So you're either talking about 8 units or 12. And potentially, obviously, I would suspect the neighbors want it to be as nice as possible. And if you go with an 8-unit option, there's no guarantee then that the neighbors get the benefit of the buffer areas, the additional landscaping and whatnot. So what could potentially be a win-win may not necessarily be that, should this not be granted. I understand and empathize with the concern over renters. I think that's just, hard to dispute that concern. However, I don't know that that issue right now is one to be decided by this committee in considering this particular petition. We've heard the good doctor say that he's going to try and be as restrictive as possible on that. I guess we could take him at his word right now. My main concern is if this is going to happen, and I'll assume it will, that you want to make it as positive for everyone who's going to be affected as possible. And I understand your concern, sir, about a depreciation in value over the years. I could only hope that an investment in the property would either help stop or turn that around. But I don't see it turning around by just letting the property sit as it is right now. So those are my thoughts.
Can I just say one thing with you guys? I just wanted to provide one comment. Somebody mentioned about...
Can you go to the podium,
I'm
please?
sorry. Do we have room for buffer if we do that? Now, when you come to this building, here is the building, here is the driveway. So driveway is way out here. Why? We save the parkings this way, So if you want to create more buffer along your home and your home, along the fence, there's no problem because driveway can be moved a little bit to the east. So there's a lot of room there. That will eliminate maybe about 3 parking spaces, as I mentioned before, that we have. Tremendous amount of parking. You'll be surprised once we do that. You said 22, we should have enough room to make more green and the trees and all that, to make it look more like residential. Thank you.
I'd like to recommend that we do approve this for, mostly because Commissioner Mendoza's more eloquent description of the issues in terms of a mixed-use building. A mixed-use building is in the cards no matter what we decide right now. And we saw that the corner building at Long Common in Burlington, those bottom stores stayed empty for years and nothing happened, and they were a detriment to the streetscape. As Adrian says, Commissioner Mendoza, if we do approve this, then that forces you, not unwillingly certainly, to comply with all of the rules and the buffers and the improvements that make this more palatable to the neighbors. And I think certainly puts you guys in a better position where you won't be hindered by or in view of any future residents. the building is going to be there in its current configuration no matter what. We're really only debating those bottom 4 units. And finally, it was zoned residential in the past. So we are not, granted, Mr. Cariello probably is the only one here who remembers when it was residential, but that is not an unexpected or out of the line zoning classification.
So we have a motion on the table. Would anybody like to second it?
I'll second it.
Thank you.
Does the motion include the conditions recommended by staff?
Yes, it does.
And does it include, the applicant said he was open to the condition that the rental be limited to financial hardship?
I don't know that that's truly in our purview, so I would not put that, as much as the neighbors do want that, I don't think that's our purview here for zoning. That's a financial and contractual issue, in my opinion. I'm not a counselor, so I defer.
I agree, it's not clear to me, I don't understand it. I would be able to impose that as a condition.
Sure.
But I have no idea legally.
Are we able to
Well,
impose that as a condition?
if there's a condition that an applicant says yes to, then you can always put it in, right? If he was not acquiescing to it, it would be a different question.
So it seems that we are proceeding on the understanding that the split level basement is the ground floor, and therefore there would be, the top 2 floors could be developed as multiple multifamily dwellings, is that right? We're fairly confident about that? I would note, just for the record, yes, some of the other things that could be allowed right now in that building are things like tattoo parlors and body piercing studios and drive-throughs and the currency exchange and a few other things that would not be allowed in the TC rezoned situation. So that's somewhat desirable, I think. Somewhat desirable to rezone.
But I don't think your question has been answered yet about a condition. Has it?
Yes, I believe it was.
I did not.
Right, so his motion does
proposal,
not.
my motion does not include a rental restrictions.
So it's the conditions recommended by staff.
Yes.
Do we want some general discussion before going into the standards?
Where did we end up? So it wasn't part of Commissioner Marple's motion, but what is the general thought about including that as a condition?
As much as I would like to include it as a condition, I don't know that we can, and I certainly don't want to jeopardize our vote tonight because we included something that technically we're not allowed to do.
Yeah, again, the only reason I raised it is because there was discussion of it, and he said
Right.
that it was okay with him, but I agree, it's not clearly an appropriate condition for the reason.
I mean, as far as the look of the development itself, I have concerns about the way it's been drawn up with the 680 square foot unit and all the rest, but I don't know that that's part of something that I feel comfortable reviewing as part of this decision. I mean, the way it's developed in the future by Dr. Shake could be like that, or he could make some other decisions as far as how to, do the floor plan. It's kind of early in the process for that.
And again, we'll be back here with the site plan, which will be more fully sketched out with all those details.
Will we be back here Thursday?
Yes.
For site plan review.
Okay.
So if the rezoning is approved for the full review, for a full multifamily building, then whenever he comes in with his plans, he will have to submit for site plan review by the Planning and Zoning Commission. And so that would need to be approved, because you'll need to be looking at the parking lot and bringing those things into conformance, and however the parking lot might need to be reconfigured, that would all fall under site plan review.
Buffers,
But it would
ingress,
be-
egress,
right.
traffic circulation, all those kinds of.
But it would only be site plan review, it's not the size of units or how the building is laid out.
Right, because that's all internal,
That's,
essentially,
yeah.
yeah.
Mhm.
And I had.
So the only impact on that would be what the final unit count ends up being, because that does affect what the required parking would be.
Yes.
So not necessarily how large the units are, but how many units specifically there are. So should something change where maybe he's doing less units, then that parking requirement would change. If he reconfigured it where you might get more units, then obviously the parking restriction would go up. But in addition to that, the lot size restricts how many units you can do as well, because the code does say you have to have so many square feet per dwelling unit for a multifamily use. So that will also be somewhat of a limiting factor in him being able to do more than 12 units, because he is getting close to that maximum.
But Sonia, which code controls that? The number of dwelling units that he can have?
That's the zoning.
Because
gonna
that's
be the
what I
zoning
emailed
code.
you about today. was
Right,
I
so
thought
the zoning
our
code only restricts parking related to dwelling units, and then it has a restriction on lot size. His lot size is fixed, so if he decides he wants to try and do 20 units, he probably will not be able to accommodate, because his lot is not big enough to accommodate 20 units.
Because of the parking restriction.
No, because of the lot size restriction.
But the number
In
of
the zoning
units
ordinance.
is, okay. You're
So the
saying in our zoning ordinance, there's a limit on the number of dwelling units on that.
In our zoning ordinance, it says for a multifamily building, you are required to have, I believe it's 1,800 square feet. I have it written down somewhere, but I can't find my notes real quick. Yeah, it's 1,800 square feet per dwelling unit. So if you were to develop brand new, say you bought a vacant lot, or you were tearing something down and you wanted to build a brand new multifamily building, you would need to abide by that restriction.
Okay.
Same thing with this conversion, he would need to abide by that restriction.
And this
So,
property is 15,000 square feet.
the building's 15,000 square feet.
Oh, the property.
The property itself is about 24,000 square feet.
So have you calculated the number of units?
Yes, so he's at a minimum of 22,000 square feet, so he might be able to accommodate one more dwelling unit in there, but he's really not going to be getting above 12 dwelling units.
Okay. So maybe we should go through the factors at this point?
Yeah, and remember, as you go through the standards, these are all just guidance. It's not like a variation or a special use where they all need to be met. They're just kind of shaping the direction of the board's decision.
So the first one considers the existing use and zoning of nearby property, which is everything. We have residents, we have McNeil, we have commercial to the south. Any thoughts on that?
I think that makes it a non-factor, quite honestly.
The extent to which property values of the property are diminished by the existing zoning. Commissioner Mendoza already addressed that.
Mr. Carriello may have addressed that too, noting that property values have gone down with the current use of the building. That the current use has not necessarily been a benefit to the neighbors.
Well, this is concerning the subject property, not the neighbor.
Property values will grow because
I'm sorry, I misread it.
Actually, this use has been since 1978, since you've owned it, correct? It's been an office building? Is that?
No, I bought the building in 83.
Oh, I'm sorry. And it has been an office building since then?
Since then, yeah.
And before that, it was a residence?
residential.
Well, that was the zoning.
Right, that was the zoning, but was it an
We don't-
actual, it was
So she said she wasn't sure what was
what the
there.
use was?
He said, when he bought it, it was
It was,
residential.
I applied for the zoning change before we closed the deal, and it was changed to office at that time.
my mistake.
That's 1983.
Oh, I see. It was changed to office residence.
My condition for purchase was that I look at the zoning change.
The extent to which the proposed amendment promotes the public health, safety, comfort, convenience, and general welfare of the village. Any thoughts on that one?
I think the amendment, which would require buffers and landscaping, would promote at least the comfort and general welfare.
Definitely an improvement for the neighbors. Relative gain to the public compared to hardship imposed on the applicant. Not sure that one's very relevant.
Yeah, I think it's the reverse of what we're looking at here.
There's the possibility that, and this is, let me know that this is just a possibility, that a more ADA and senior compatible building may be a benefit to the public. The applicant clearly has a financial albatross that he's got with it only being 17% rented. So there is a hardship to it remaining only office in the current market.
Well, jumping ahead to I, which is a little bit related, that the proposed amendment will benefit the residents of the village as a whole and not just the applicant. It made me think of aging in place and how our seniors could downsize and have a building with an elevator. Riverside doesn't have a lot of that property and not a lot of opportunities to build that type of property. Going back to E, the suitability of the property for purposes for which it is presently zoned, i.e. the feasibility of developing the property in question for one or more of the uses permitted under the existing zoning classification. Commissioner Miller commented on that. CMAP indicated that there really isn't much of a market for office space.
Although one could argue that something that Riverside doesn't have a lot of is commercial properties, and especially viable commercial properties on arterial streets. And Ogden is an obvious candidate for that. We've only got really Ogden and Harlem where that can be done. So we're kind of decreasing that opportunity. That's really my only concern in this, is that in 2009 it was rezoned, possibly for that very reason.
Other thoughts on that one?
Well, on that general subject, I think I agree with Commissioner Colatiero's general point, which is, the tax revenue that would be coming from this piece of property, my understanding is it could be reduced once it's rezoned, or when it's used as a residence, as opposed to being used for commercial purposes. And at the same time, you bring in more residents into the village, which impose a greater burden on the services that the village and the school district and everyone provides. So you could see it that it's actually going to impose a burden on the residents of the village and from a financial perspective, a taxing perspective.
But they'll be paying property tax.
And spending money in the village, theoretically.
Perhaps.
Hopefully.
Yeah, but it would bring in the property tax, which would help with
But does it,
village services.
will the property tax that will be brought in compared to the property taxes being paid right now?
I see what
Who
you're saying,
knows? My understanding is that it may be less and less over time. The value of that property increases, in 20, 30 years because it is a desirable building, perhaps. But right now, and if you have 12 units and each of those, and there's, I don't know, 6, 8 kids that live in those units and they're using the school districts, that can be expensive. So that's my only concern with this.
Other comments on E?
If I could answer that question about the next. I'm paying about
Well, the public hearing's closed, so unless the commission has specific questions for you.
I'm sorry.
I would like to ask Dr.
Sure.
Dr. Sheik a question. How much are you paying in taxes, if I may ask?
When it was fully occupied, I was paying maximum $156,000 a year. And right now, because it's vacant, and I'm paying $42,000. And I may be getting some money back this year because I appealed. And I was only 70% occupied.
To clarify, to perhaps expand upon what you said, your taxes are based on, or somewhat computed on the occupancy.
In the occupancy, yeah. Because they give you a break. I have appealed that the last 3, 4, 5 years, and they have gone from 156 to 158,000. Maximum it was occupied down to this year. My attorney said maybe somewhere in the realm of about 30,000 because of the vacancy.
For
Right, so
commercial,
each year, the assessor will value it as if it's fully occupied, but if you appeal and show your vacancy rate, they will lower it.
F, the length of time the property in question has been vacant is presently zoned, considered in the context of development in the area where the property is located. Well, there's one tenant right now, and it's been that way for a while. So that's a standard that we can take into consideration. G, the evidence or lack of evidence of community need for the use proposed by the applicant. So the realtors weighed in on that one. Condominiums with parking, albeit perhaps uncovered. Any other thoughts on that?
We'll just add in the other comments that have come up about accessibility and having units that are available for accessibility in the village as a benefit.
Well, I think the comparable properties analysis and sold versus active listings does give us some insight. And that insight, the way I read it, is units that are in the 80 to 150,000 range have sold fairly quickly, and units that are priced anywhere from 180 to 450 are still on the market. So too high end may not sell that quickly, and that's probably about all as far as I want to go down that road. There's some demand, it's not infinite demand.
The consistency of the proposed amendment with village plans.
I think it's consistent. I think the location of as transitional commercial is appropriate.
Any other thoughts? We already covered I. The extent to which the amendment creates nonconformities.
I'd like to go back up on I if I could.
Please do.
The residents have rightfully noted their concern over rentals versus ownership. And while I don't think the commission is in a position to create condominium rules on that, that is something we are taking into account as we have this discussion. The concerns of the neighbors.
So if the board does approve the zoning amendment and the plan goes through, then the buffer, the nonconformities would be addressed.
Correct.
flagged this one, I'm not sure what we can say about it. The trend of development, if any, in the general area of the property in question.
I don't think we have any evidence of anything going on over there, right?
I think the if any is key.
Except for the existence of the townhomes on both sides of Ogden and maybe their condos or apartments in that general area. But I don't know if that's a trend.
I don't know.
I think those were
I don't
built a
know how
while
long
ago.
was it?
Townhomes were built probably in the mid-2000s, I want to say, that one set of townhomes. That's probably the most recent development in that area.
And there hasn't been any commercial building recently on any of those lots, right?
Whether adequate public facilities are available, including but not limited to schools, parks, police and fire protection, roads, sanitary sewers, storm sewers and water lines, which would be permitted on the subject property if the amendment were adopted.
All of the existing utilities are already there. I did run the proposal by the fire department and the police department, and they did not see there being a significant issue with it being converted to residential versus office uses and having a detrimental impact on their ability to serve that property.
So based on those standards and our discussion of them, any further questions, comments? We ready to vote? Director, please call the roll.
Commissioner Marvel?
Aye.
Commissioner Mendoza?
Yes.
Commissioner Miller?
Yes.
Commissioner Pelletier?
Yes.
Commissioner Scanlon?
Yes.
Chairperson Mateo?
Yes.
And motion passes.
Sure.
I thank you, all the trustees and the neighbors who participated. I'll stop over myself personally, give you my cell name, the cell number. In case you see any issues, even during the construction, please call us. Just to share with you, the 3-bedroom condo on the top, my younger daughter will be living there. She goes to Benedictine, and she is divorced, has a child, who is going to Hinsdale Central right now. So this is going to stay in the family, and I welcome you to give us the feedback when they start the landscaping, the buffer and all that. If you want us to do anything else, which will be more pleasant for the area. And I can tell you proudly, what taught me Riverside over the years, I can't pay that back. I flourished there, I started here, became more successful than I could have ever thought, so I thank you guys. Coming out of Hinsdale, where I had a house, I said, why the hell they wouldn't let me put the fence? And then I find out, because that's the way to keep the neighborhood the way it should be. And I respect that, and I hope we can work with you guys. Nobody's perfect. If there is any shortcoming on our part, please let us know. My goal is not just to leave the way it is. We want to beautify for selfish reason also, to make it look more like a residential, because it'll be more marketable. I have always believed if you do a good job, you always tend to succeed, and that's where I am today. Thank you very much, everybody, and thank you.
Thank you. So we are a recommending body. It will go next to the Board of Trustees, who have the final approval or denial.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone, for coming out on such a beautiful night.
If you did speak, if you wouldn't mind filling out this form, just so I get the proper spelling of your names for the minutes, that would be very helpful. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
So we have old business, a continued discussion and recommendations to staff on draft text amendment related to attached garages and driveways. Do we think this will take a while, or do you think we can crank it out and not have to continue it?
I'm hoping we can just crank it out. The board had a
Technical
couple
term.
of recommended changes, so I just kind of wanted to make sure we're comfortable with that. If there's anything that we wanted to incorporate beyond what I incorporated from the board's discussion, in preparation for this going out for a public hearing for next month. I do have to get the public notice out next week to the paper, so I'd like to kind of have that finalized before I get everything over to the paper for the public hearing. So,
So if you guys are game, we can carry on? Great, thanks.
okay. So, all of your changes were incorporated into the text amendment, including allowing the driveways to widen to only the 6 inches beyond the garage doors or the walls, whichever is less. We talked about a taper rate and had just kept it at, it has to be 10 feet by the time it gets to the property line. And also, we made some changes regarding detached garages that are located in the side yard, that they would have to follow the same driveway and design guidelines as like an attached front-loaded garage. So those were kind of incorporated into the proposed text amendment based on your feedback, and that was provided to the village board for them to review and make sure we're all kind of on the same page and they're comfortable with us moving forward with your direction. At the board meeting, in general, everybody was comfortable with the direction this was headed. There was a couple of recommendations. Specifically, Trustee Pollock stated that he thought the design guidelines needed a little bit more clarification, especially if a front elevation has multiple setbacks. So like say, there's like a 5-foot offset where it comes back and then maybe another 5-foot offset, or maybe it offsets kind of in the middle and then comes back out. Where do you measure from? And I had said, well, my idea had been like whatever is the larger of them would probably be where I would measure from. They thought that the code should be a little bit more explicit about it. In the course of that discussion, their recommendation was that you would take the furthest back point. That would be the point where the setback would need to be measured from. So I did make that adjustment. I think the commission had made some comments about trying to make sure that we're clear and where do we measure from. So I thought it would be, here's an idea, this is what we go with, and then I incorporated that into the text amendment. Additionally, there was also some concern about a house that's, say, 50 feet set back, being able to keep that driveway at that 20-foot width or whatever for a very long period of time before coming down at the last minute to that 10-foot width. So they wanted there to be some sort of taper rate. Trustee Pollock suggested that it be within 25 feet of the front of the garage or the property line, whichever comes first. So that would make some accommodation for those houses that have the smaller setbacks to basically just have to get down to that 10 feet right at the property line. But those that have the larger setbacks would have that sort of 10-foot area to taper till they get to that 10 feet. So they're allowed to be, the way we wrote it was that you get 15 feet of approach, basically, of that full width of your garage doors. And then you have to taper down. And you have to taper down to 10 feet now, based on the board's recommendation, within a 10-foot distance. So by 25 feet measured from the face of the garage, you would need to get down to that 10-foot width. So that way you kind of restrict how much of that wide part of the driveway you have in the front yard. So I did incorporate that into the proposed text amendment that you have before you. The other change was that if we were going to allow detached garages to be closer to the house, they wanted better fire or rating restriction on that. So they just asked that the building code be amended to require that fire-rated walls for anything less than 10 feet. Currently, the building code only requires it for anything under 3 feet, so we would amend the 2006 International Residential Code to anything less than 10 feet would have to have that fire rating. So that has been incorporated. Additionally, Trustee Lumpson expressed some concern about setback restrictions for attached garages as they pertain to additions or remodels to existing homes. And his concern was that requiring that 5-foot setback of an attached garage was going to be too restrictive and ultimately would encourage people to tear down a house rather than remodel it. And he also thought that the restriction would cause more impervious surface on a property rather than less for existing homes. So based on his feedback, the board asked that the commission consider not requiring the new design guidelines for existing houses and perhaps continuing to utilize what the previous restrictions were in the code for existing houses, trying to incorporate an attached garage onto them. I did not include that amendment in the code, so leaving it kind of for your discussion. Obviously, it's something that we can vet out as well at the public hearing process, but I wanted to make you aware of that discussion that did happen at the board level. Currently, as you recall, our requirement is that if you build an addition onto your home for an attached garage, or if you were building a new home with an attached garage, the garage is not allowed to project more than 5 feet from the main facade of the building. Additionally, you have to remember that we do have street yard requirements. So with an existing home, whatever that closest point of that house is to the street is the established setback for that property. So kind of depending on how that goes, you're not really going to be able to project 5 feet. With an addition, you wouldn't be able to project 5 feet in front of, but you could presumably then do something that's in line with the house versus having to set it back. So that's just a kind of something to, just in general, how that restriction would apply to currently to existing homes is that setback. You know, when you tear a house down, you can push the house back so that garage then is right at that setback line and projecting out 5 feet. But with an existing home, being able to project 5 feet out, probably not feasible because of how our setbacks are established, because you can't project into a street yard with an addition. It has to meet your required setback.
And the garage counts as an addition.
Yeah, it's considered part of the principal structure and is required to meet the required street yard.
Which would be the existing street yard.
Yep, whatever that point is.
Thank you for that clarification. Sorry.
No, I said Trustee Lumsden said a lot of things in that meeting because I watched it a couple of times. And at one point, he seemed to be arguing that now that people can put unenclosed front porches on their houses, that people should be able to also have a garage that meets that same front facade, because then you could have a uniform roof line. But I think he changed his opinion on that during the meeting, because I don't think that's where the board was going at the end. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, I'm not sure the board was quite going in that direction, but I think they wanted to allow some sort of flexibility for an existing home to be able to accommodate.
To meet the existing facade, not go in front of
Right,
it.
not necessarily have to be set back.
Okay.
Thank you for that clarification, because that helps me to understand where Trustee Lumsden's comments fit and what they would allow.
Any thoughts on different rules for existing homes, adding an attached front-loading garage?
I'm sorry, my next question to Sonia was, have we seen a lot of additions that are adding front-loaded garages?
I have had no additions that have been an attached front-loaded garage. I've had an addition that's been rear, like on the back of the house, side-loaded garage. I've had a remodel where they've created a kind of like below-level garage into a house. That was over on, I want to say it was Shenstone. So the way that house was situated on the property, it did not have a garage at all, and there was no way to put a detached garage in the back because the way the house was positioned, it was too close. It was only 5 feet off the property line on either side, so you couldn't get a car past the house into the backyard without taking out part of the house. So what they ended up doing was creating below grade, so they kind of dug out the basement to create a garage in the basement. So the driveway goes down and you go down into the garage. So that's really the only garage conversions, additions that I've seen. I haven't really had an attached front-loaded garage addition onto a house.
With respect to that very situation, it occurred to me that we should have some kind of an exception for below grade front-loaded garages, because those can't be pushed back 5 feet by definition. They have to be basically at the facade of the house.
Mhm.
I mean, I know now we're getting into kind of minutiae in the code, but if we were saying that front-loaded garages have to be pushed back 5 feet, then we're barring people from having sub-level front-loaded
Well, if you are
garages.
building new construction, you can still have your main portion of your house and then have that garage or that portion of the house that would have the garage still be set back, it would just be down, and then you would have, you know, thinking
That
of
would be a
like
bit
a
weird,
split level
though. I
kind
mean,
of
that could be a bit
situation.
weird if it's a front-loaded garage to do that. So I don't know, I would be in favor of having that exception if other commissioners agree that that's rational, so we're not having people come in with a variance. And I actually think that having sub-level front-loaded garages is a lot more attractive than a standard surface-level front-loaded garage because it's less visually glaring. You're not looking right at the garage doors, and you're not even looking at the driveway so much because it's it's going down into the ground, so it's less visually unpleasant to me. So I like that as an option. But as far as allowing what you said, as far as allowing existing houses to have front-loaded garages that aren't pushed back, if there's going to be an addition remodel, I don't necessarily object to that proposal myself.
If my thought is the current footprint as a front-loaded garage equal to or in front of the front facade, rebuilding it in that same configuration, I would be okay with it. But if they're adding a front-loaded garage to an existing house, I would prefer that it has the setback. And I don't know the extent to which Trustee Lumpson's concerns would, I just don't know. Would that then cause someone to tear the house down if they were adding a front-loading garage to an existing house and they had to push it back 5 feet? I don't know. So my thought was that if the footprint is already there and you're replacing something because it was damaged or for whatever reason you needed to replace it, you could replace it in the same footprint and not have to have it set back. But if you're adding something that doesn't exist, a front-loaded garage to an existing home, I would prefer that it still has the setback.
What's your sense for how many tear-downs result because somebody wants a front-loading garage? And
I think most tear-downs happen primarily due to the quality of the house and perhaps in some cases how it is positioned on the lot. I don't necessarily know that it has to do with the fact that it doesn't have a garage, but I think anything that's being built new is always going to have an attached, I've had one, that's not had an attached garage. So I think, if a house is torn down, it is going to have an attached garage on it. But I don't necessarily know that the lack of an attached garage is causing the tear downs. We have plenty of houses in town that are being purchased, that are being remodeled, that are having additions put onto them that have a detached garage in the back, and they're not choosing to tear down the house to be able to build something that has an attached garage. Most of the work that we're getting is people who are doing remodels and doing additions onto homes and not tear downs,
so it doesn't sound as if there's much demand for a different rule for renovating an existing home to add a front-loading garage.
It's fairly minimal. I think I've had one other inquiry into it. We have the house on Shenstone that did it. I want to say I've had one other, might have been on Uvedale, that somebody inquired about it, but nobody's moved forward with the permit to do that. So there's, I suppose, in my 4 years, I've had 2 people asking about it.
And the one on Uvedale, what were they thinking about?
I'm trying to figure out how to do an attached garage addition.
Like putting it on the side?
Mhm.
Not talking about people putting a garage in front of their house.
Right.
So, I'm thinking I'm not sure what Commissioner Scanlon said, but when I was initially thinking of someone remodeling a house to put on a front-loaded garage, given the width of most of our lots, I was thinking that someone is going to take, their dining room and change that into a front-loaded garage. not that they're going to put it next to the house.
Right.
And then they would do another living addition in the back of the house. But they
And I think
wanna
that's
have
what
that.
Trustee Lumsden was thinking as well, is that, is there a way to accommodate it within the existing footprints to, you know, convert, you know, a dining room or whatever
Right.
it is into the garage and then do that?
And then those
Um,
people, if they have a detached garage, they tear that down, and then they have a bigger backyard, and that would be how I was envisioning.
Yes, I was envisioning something that would be attached to an
Next to
existing
it.
structure. Yeah, so I guess the clarification you're raising now, or the point you're raising now, is kind of what I was envisioning. Like, if it's in the current footprint, I guess I'd be okay with it staying, be it a garage or dining room, to your point. But if it's something that's being added on, I
If it's an
would prefer
addition
that it
onto
has.
it,
Okay.
you prefer it
A
to
new
set back.
footprint, yeah,
Within the existing footprint, is it an addition?
or a remodel.
It's just a remodel.
But then if they were to, I mean, again, in my thinking, they would then be putting more living space somewhere else. So they'd be coming in for an addition application or whatever it is.
Yeah, I mean,
And then
most
they
likely,
can
I mean, in the
figure-
case.
And then they'd have to put in a driveway, obviously, in the, where the dining room was, in front of the dining room.
Well,
So they'd be
they-
changing the orientation of their driveway.
And they'd be putting in a front-loaded garage that is in line with the face of their house.
As opposed to
Which is-
pushing it back somehow by
Right,
moving
right,
their whole house, their dining
So
room back.
I now understand what the concern was. I was thinking again of additions.
Right.
Of within the existing
Right,
footprint.
I think the one thing
That
that I
makes
have
sense.
is with 181 North Delaplane, and I think I showed you guys those plans. Initially, it had been thought that it was going to be a conversion, so they were going to put a second-story addition on this little ranch, and they were going to take what was, I think, like a living room area in the front and kind of steal away where the front door was as well and move that front door over and create that two-car garage in the front. But then that was forcing also then an addition to have to happen in the back to, you know, accommodate that living space then on the first floor and then be able to have the bedrooms on the second floor. So in the end, they ended up tearing down the entire house. So I have to look at it as new construction now versus conversion. So there was some things that, but the initial proposal had been kind of what you're talking about exactly, where they were trying to take that living space and convert it into a garage and then accommodate that living room area elsewhere on the first floor. And I think part of it was, there was like a bedroom, obviously there was bedrooms on the first floor. You know, the bedroom area kind of got turned into kitchen, dining room, great room kind of area, and then all bedrooms got moved to the second floor. But there was an increase in that footprint on the first floor to kind of offset what was lost by the garage taking over basically half of the first floor. So there has been some interest in that. The execution of it, though, a little sketchy.
So your points, Chairman Mateo, were you thinking maybe we wouldn't add something in for this now because the interest is low? Is that where you were headed, or am I putting words in your mouth?
You're not. That's what I was thinking. It could go to variation process if it came up, but I'm just one person, so.
Given the lack of demand, I don't know that it warrants whole-scale changes or additions or edits or, so.
I think we can, I can live with the idea that this ends up in the variation process where someone comes to me and us and says, I want to maintain the existing footprint of the house, but I'd like to change where the garage is.
What about Commissioner Miller's comment about a below-grade garage not being flush with the facade of the house? Would that need to be set back? It would be under what we're talking about here. But is that kind of weird? Because we're not the design police, but.
We're not, it would, I think, I briefly thought about this after Commissioner Miller mentioned it. It would force it could potentially force an overhang where the garage is pushed under, but the rest of the house is forward. Some people like that, some people don't. Again, variation process, if you really think that lowering the garage door would make the aesthetics that much better and that much more palatable to the historical side, then make that proposal.
Yeah, I don't see any problem with a setback for a lowered garage.
Just wanted to check.
Oh, just one point of interest. How much does it cost to come in for variation? Just the fee?
It's a $500 flat fee.
Okay.
All right, so no change for subterranean, sub-level garages, and no changes regarding existing versus new construction for setback. Okay, so I will move forward with the proposed amendment as I have it in here then, and get that ready. The Plant Commission, I apologize. Preservation Commission meets in June, so they will review the proposed text amendment and provide any feedback that they have, and you will have that information for the public hearing for your June meeting.
I had some other comments.
Oh, okay.
Reviewing, all of this. Again, one of the things I noticed was in the bulk requirements table, the bonus that we wanted to give for having a detached garage only applies to new residential construction. So Trustee Lumpson's comments about, impacting tear downs and profitable reuse of properties and all the rest made me wonder if we don't want to give a bonus for not just new residential construction, but whatever additions, changes to an existing piece of residential property. I don't know what anyone else thinks about that. And maybe someone wants, to put in a detached garage that they're, moving on their property, or maybe they don't have a garage or whatever. I'm just thinking it would be fair to treat them both the same.
If somebody already has a detached garage and
But
wants
perhaps they want
to
to move up.
replace it, we would give them a bonus
Right.
to be able to do either more building footprint on their house if they wanted to.
Well, so
or-
let's say someone comes in and they want to gut a house and there's an old detached garage in the back. Should they be required to either have an attached garage or renovate that old detached garage? And would that be sort of an albatross, and they would say, well, let's just tear the whole thing down, I gotta deal with that old detached garage and everything else, and if I build a new house and I put in a new detached garage, I don't know how people think, but it just seemed to me there wasn't a good reason to not treat them both the same.
Or like that house on Riverside Road that was rehabbed, its footprint was enlarged, wasn't it? And I think there was a,
Yes, they did do an addition on the back, and then they built a detached garage in the rear.
so to encourage people to not tear down a house, couldn't we give them that bonus?
So that they could do more of an addition if they keep or build a detached garage.
Thoughts?
So we're saying that residential properties get whatever.
So now-
100 square foot bump.
Everybody gets, 200 to 400 square
For
feet.
detached garage.
For building coverage, but it doesn't change any of the impervious,
Right.
so
Right.
our big concern seems to be impervious. Is
I mean, again,
that-
this can be something we can flesh out at the public hearing and make those amendments as part of that discussion. It doesn't necessarily have to be finalized today if there's not a general consensus on how to flesh that out. But based on the discussion that had happened before, it kind of sounded like that bonus, we were looking more at new construction versus existing, somebody doing an addition or a remodel, or somebody that had an existing garage. Getting that. So that's how I wrote it. But if we want to amend it and try to provide more of that flexibility for people wanting to do additions, to be able to get that little bit of extra area across the board, basically, because just about everybody has a detached garage in town, we can do that.
The idea, if we could be assured that the petitioner was actually going to take down the existing detached garage and add the front-loading garage. We aren't really assured of that.
Oh, right, I guess that makes sense.
Pardon me?
I guess that makes sense. You wouldn't just automatically get a bonus for what already exists.
Right.
Does that make sense?
You want to encourage people to keep detached garages, right? That's kind of what we're trying to do.
Right.
So I feel like you would,
Surface isn't changing.
because if they're doing a bunch of work, then that's always going to be a consideration, right?
Well, maybe we can get some feedback from preservation, and then, as you said, discuss it at the public hearing.
Yep.
And I had a few other wording,
Okay.
concerns in one of the, let me see. Where's the paper? So it's in E, 3, B, and then 4. We're talking about the driveways and how they taper. So it's residential garage requirements, I think,
Uh-huh.
and then driveways, or I'm sorry, it's just E driveways, is what I see. And so it was to me a little confusing. I'm suggesting that we add in the third line of B, where it says distance of 20 feet back from the garage doors before tapering, that I think we want to say before beginning to taper to the required driveway width of 10 feet.
Okay.
I don't know if everyone agrees with that. And then you'd repeat that a couple lines down where it says distance of 15 feet back from the garage doors before beginning to taper to the required driveway width. And then in 4B, the same thing.
Okay.
And then it also in 3B, the last two red lines, it says the maximum width of 10 feet must be achieved within 25 feet of the garage doors or at the property line. And that follows the sentence that says, in the case of a detached garage located in the side yard. So it wasn't clear to me if that final sentence referred to just detached garages that are in the side yard or any detached garages.
That's supposed to, that's supposed to just be for detached garages located in the side yard.
It is.
Mhm.
Okay, because that's how I read it, that it would only apply to the side yard.
Correct.
Okay. I don't, maybe that needs to be clarified, so there's no disagreement, but,
I also
Or a
have a couple
semicolon.
things. Are you done, Commissioner?
yes, I'm done.
A couple things. So under the proposed text amendment on page 2, under commercial driveways, so we're changing that to, they shall not exceed 24 feet in width. But I just wasn't sure if there should be any qualification on that maximum footage. You know, when we have the residential driveways, we're saying that it's for the width of the garage. But here, there isn't any kind of qualifiers, just saying you could have it up to 24 feet with, you know, it could be 24-foot spans without any relationship to anything else on the property. I just wasn't sure if there should be an additional qualification on that.
I was trying to kind of simplify it, and I guess my idea would be when we're looking at a commercial setting, typically it's one access and it's two ways, and so it needs to be the 24
Got
feet
it.
wide.
Okay.
You know, I suppose in instances where maybe, you know, say you're on Harlem Avenue and IDOT's only going to give you a right out, then in that instance, it would be smaller, but then so would the associated aisle that it meets up with to come out. I don't really see commercial users spending money where they don't need to spend money, as far as concrete and all that is concerned.
Yeah, I
So-
did try to drive around and look at different situations to see what the impact would be, but I'm okay with that. And so then on page 5, in that same section, under driveways for residential detached garages, it says that, you know, that they could have an additional paved area or turnaround area, and there isn't any indication on the size of that, so I'm assuming that the size of that turnaround area would be controlled by the maximum impervious surface requirements. That's what kind of keeps that in check. Okay. And so then on the next page, page 6, driveways for residential attached garages, would we ever have, and I tried to find it in the code, would we ever have a service door on the front of an attached garage? Or would they always be around the side? Because the current proposed text doesn't cover for that. That if you had, you know, a service door, you know, like a person door as opposed to?
I've not,
Typically, you don't.
You wouldn't, okay.
It's usually either on the side or at the rear.
Okay, so fair, so
Of
we
the
don't need to
garage.
add anything for that? Okay, and then on page 7, we talk about giving this bonus for detached garages. In the information you gave us from Naperville, I thought they had an interesting comment that they give a bonus, a credit, if the detached garage is located in part or in whole in the rear yard. And Wheaton had something that says only detached garages that are located entirely beyond the principal building in the rear yard shall get their bonus in Wheaton. So I wasn't sure if we wanted to consider something about that, to say that you only get this bonus if the detached garage is fully in the back. I wasn't sure the thoughts on that, because then the flip side is that then there's more concrete. It's going to go further back, so there is that trade-off. I wasn't sure what anyone's thoughts were on that. Should we, in order to receive the bonus, is there any?
Technically, and that's a fair point, because we do have that small allowance that in some instances you would be allowed to have a detached garage in the side yard.
Right.
But that's only if you don't have a rear yard that can actually accommodate a detached
So you couldn't
garage
put it there
due to,
anyways.
having a substandard rear yard. So that's something that we can certainly see about saying, only if they're entirely in the rear yard.
Are there any thoughts on that?
Why wouldn't we give them the bonus though if they're prohibited, if they can't put it in the rear yard?
They probably couldn't put an addition in the rear yard either then,
Right.
Got it.
because of setback restrictions.
Got it.
So,
Okay. So it's not really applicable for our community, to your point.
right, I mean, currently, as it stands, detached garages are only permitted in the rear yard, except in that one circumstance where somebody has a rear yard that's too small to actually fit a detached garage, in which case then they would be allowed to put it in the side yard.
And in how many instances are that?
There's not too many in town, but, I think that's I think about the new house that was built on Blooming Bank across from the swim club. That's an example where it's a fairly shallow lot. It did have a detached garage before, but it did also have a very small house, and it did actually exceed its impervious surface and its building coverage restrictions, as I recall, as the previous one stood. So in that instance, they could have chosen to do a narrower house and done a detached garage in the side yard if perhaps the rear yard wasn't large enough to accommodate a detached garage, which, was tight. I mean, that whole site was very tight. So, but they chose to do an attached one in that instance. So, I can think of one house, and it was the one that we denied the variation for, that had a garage in the side yard. But it has a garage in the side yard because somebody put a garage in the side yard, not because the rear yard didn't accommodate it. It's just non-conforming. Is what it is. So,
Other comments?
Oh, yeah, there was one other thing that Trustee Lumpson mentioned, which is about this 5-foot strip not making sense under building purview, like how builders do stuff. 5 feet is just, doesn't make really any sense. So I don't know if part of the public hearing, we should have some comment on that. Or should it be 4 feet, or, I don't know, whatever makes sense from a builder's perspective, rather than 5 feet?
I can look into that.
Because they would know better than we do.
And I think if they can go forward 5 feet to create a porch, I don't know why they couldn't go 5 feet to accommodate a
Right,
garage, but
Maybe there's something that makes more sense than 5 feet, maybe it's 4 feet. So it's interesting, I have no idea.
I think that becomes an architectural.
But Trustee Lumpson seemed to suggest like it doesn't relate to the size of a brick. What's a brick, 10 inches, or I don't know, but.
bricks can also be cut, so.
And you can go more than 5 feet, right? It's a 5 foot minimum, so.
Right, no, that's right. I just thought that maybe that should be something we should build it into. You could ask.
Refresh us.
So that's right, and more from us now. Do you think you need a motion to go to public hearing, or?
No, we don't need a motion, as long as
No.
there's a consensus.
So if there's a consensus that we're ready to move forward with it, and,
So we have no new business. Our next meeting is June 27th, so hopefully we'll have the public hearing regarding this then. And anything else on the agenda that you're aware of?
I have a couple of people that have talked about variations, so we'll see if anybody gets their applications in by Friday. So,
Okay.
we'll see.
All right. Motion to adjourn?
Second.
All in favor? Thank you, everyone. Have a good night. Thank you.
Is that a little quick on the draw?